Hey everybody, before we dive into today's episode, I want to remind you about Church Revitalization University. If you're listening to this on or before Saturday, February 1st, you have one more opportunity to hop into the course before registration closes. So as a special thank you to our podcast listeners, you can get 10% off a standard registration by using the discount code PODCAST10. That's PODCAST10. Again, get 10% off of a standard registration. Use promo code podcast10 at checkout. Go to churchrevitalizationuniversity.com and register before 11:59 p.m. Central Time on Saturday, February 1st, and use podcast10 at checkout to get 10% off. All right, we'll see you in the course.
Hello, and welcome to the Church Revitalization Podcast, brought to you by the Malphurs Group team, where each week we tackle important, actionable topics to help churches thrive. And now, here's your hosts, Scott Ball and A.J. Mathieu.
Welcome to episode 24 of the Church Revitalization Podcast. In this week's episode, A.J. and I discuss when is the best time of year to do a strategic planning process. Churches often ask us if there's a best or worst time of year to do strategic planning. So in this episode, we go season by season, sharing the pros and cons of starting a process in each time of the year. To read today's show notes, visit malphursgroup.com/24. It's malphursgroup.com/24. Let's dive in.
All right, Scott, it is great to be back on the Church Revitalization Podcast. Hey, everybody, this is episode 24. Glad you're with us. And this week, we're talking about when is the best time of year for a strategic planning process. And we get this question a lot, like, when should we do this? And the big question is usually summer, or should we do it? Is it okay to start in the fall? And so Scott took the time to kind of just go through this, and we've talked about what happens with each quarter. And yeah. Scott, you did a great job of throwing out just a few bullet points of pros and cons for us this week as we look, quarter one through quarter four.
Yeah, I'm actually a little bit surprised at how often we get this question. I think there's an assumption that there's a good time of year and a bad time of year to do a strategic planning process. And the fact is that the Malphurs Group's been working with churches through strategic planning processes at various times of the year for 20 years. And so we've kind of seen it all and experienced it all. And we want to share some of our perspective, I guess, on the pros and cons of each quarter. And actually, you could think of it Q1, 2, 3, and 4, but really the ministry year breaks down into slightly different categories. I mean, it's roughly Q1 through Q4, but it's a little bit different. So the way I've got it broken down, AJ, is sort of before Easter, after Easter, summer, and fall, before Christmas. And so I know that doesn't quite line up with the months of a fiscal quarters, but it's sort of the rhythm of the ministry year, right? Like before and after Easter, summer, and then the fall. Following
largely, like a public school year.
That's right.
September is like the start of everything, and things end in May. That's just kind of the way the church has followed as well, because it's sort of the rhythm of life, culturally in the United States, at least. Other countries, your mileage may vary, but
and even from place to place. Like I know, worked in the Northeast, and their school year goes all the way into June, like mid-June. But here in the South, where I live, school year wraps up at the end of May. So keep in mind there might be a little bit of adjustment here depending on what the school schedule and stuff
summers
is
have just gotten shorter as well. I mean, I don't want to talk about how old I am, but I really feel like we used to get like a pretty solid 3 months off, and it's kind of 2.25 months now, starting earlier and earlier in August. So
that's because AJ, back in your day, they had to send you out in the fields in the summertime
we had work to do, and the sun was up. Our hands were in the dirt.
Yeah.
So
let's be clear. Were your hands in the dirt, AJ?
I have had some dirty hands, Scott.
I like to keep my hands. Anybody who knows me knows I like to keep my hands as dirt-free as possible.
But what ends up being funny is that, some churches are just really, they're kind of strict on when we do things, when we don't do things.
Yeah.
For us as an organization that works with a pretty, broad scope of types of churches and church cultures, we end up doing something with churches year round. But for those churches though, in the process are like, this is the best time for us to do this.
Yeah.
But across the spectrum of the church at large, it covers the entire year. So you know your church. And but for those of you asking the question, let's go ahead and jump in and let's just kind of talk through these things, Scott. So first quarter, which again is kind of your before Easter quarter. What are the pros?
Yeah, so the pros of doing a process, basically, if you're listening to this sort of as it's being released, it's the time of year that we're in right now before Easter. And the pros here are that there's sort of this new year mentality all the way. AJ and I worked actually together in earlier in January, and I told somebody Happy New Year, and it was like, I don't know, what was it, AJ, like 8 or 9 days into the year?
Yeah. It was after the first week of January for sure.
Yeah. And AJ was like, it's too late, man. You can't say Happy New Year anymore. And I was like, whatever, watch me. But all the way through January and even into February, there is still this sense like it's a new year. It still feels fresh. And just like people are willing to make New Year's resolutions personally, they're kind of more open to thinking through, okay, how can we maximize this year? Which, side note, that's one of the reasons why we did a 2020 Vision, Getting Started with 2020 Vision webinar this week. I don't know when this releases, it may have already happened. If you're interested in it, maybe we can hook you up with the recording. But, we're doing webinars and stuff like that on this topic right now because people are still interested in trying to maximize the year. So also schedules tend to be more open, AJ. People are not as busy this time of year with different things. And so yeah, it's a good time of year for those
January is September's cousin.
Yeah, right.
Both of them are kind of like starting points. So
yeah.
All right. And so what are the cons then, Scott, on the before Easter quarter?
Yes, there are a few. So it's a great time to start, but there are a few negatives. Not negatives, just challenges you got to navigate. The first one would be, depending on where you're at in the country or around the world, weather might impact your meetings. I'm working right now with a Baptist association in the mountains of North Carolina, and there's a little asterisk next to all of our meeting times because all of our meeting times are in the winter. It's like, hey, you know what? We might have to be flexible on this because if it comes a snowing in the mountains of North Carolina, like, we're not meeting. So, you've got to be aware that you might have to readjust your meetings if you get weather impact there. But if you live in sunny Florida or Texas or someplace like that, that's not likely to be a problem.
Yeah, I'm working with a church in Florida right now, so weather is not a concern. Now, during hurricane season, maybe there'll be an asterisk.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, that's right. Yeah, you got to watch out in July. Also, you have to be sure that Easter doesn't distract from implementation and that you execute planning through the summer to maximize the fall. So here's what I mean by that. Like, you can go through this process in sort of January, February, March, or February, March, beginning of April before Easter. And then Easter gets there, and then you get all distracted by planning Easter and executing Easter and doing all that. And then you forgot all the work that you did. And then it's summertime, and then you're kind of in and out because of vacations and this and that and the other thing. And then before you know it, you're scratching your head, and it's November, and you're going, oh, wait, didn't we say we were going to do something different this year? And that's no good. So it's easy. If you start at the beginning of the year, you have to be sure that you follow the implementation process. Like, if you're working with us or you're going through Church Revitalization University, really stick to that implementation timeline and that process. Otherwise, it's easy to get distracted, first by Easter, then by summer. And then finally, one of the if you're starting right at the beginning of January, you have to start some of that planning, that pre-planning around Christmas time, and that can be hard. But if you kind of wait till the end of January or the beginning of February to start kind of like right around now, then that is not a challenge you have work around.
Yeah,
So,
if you're doing Church Revitalization University, you could definitely be pretty well to start 2 or 3 weeks before your start date, getting your team together, and we give you tools to do that and help organize who's going to be in it. If you're working with us one-on-one directly, then we're typically a month, maybe up to 6 weeks out, just on the pre-planning. There's some travel planning that happens, and we're scheduling things out in a greater capacity. And then you putting your team together. And then we also do some assessments with your team ahead of time that we need to take time for them to take the assessments and then us to collate data. So it's a little bit longer pre-start process. But that's always something to consider as well. What's going on, leading up to the start of your revitalization process.
yes, indeed.
All right. Second quarter after Easter. Scott, what are the pros of that time of year?
Yeah, the nice thing is now you don't have to worry about being distracted by Easter and all the preparation for Easter. And in fact, you might even have sort of an Easter bump, which can maybe make people go, okay, yeah, be optimistic about the future and enthusiasm for the church in general. And so that's a good thing. Also, this tends to be a good time for scheduling. Once you get past Easter, you have April, late April, beginning of May tends to not be difficult to get stuff together. And so that's good. You still have some flexibility with the schedule, which is important.
Earlier Easter is usually easier. Late
yeah,
Easter
earlier Easter, late
yeah.
Easter stuff.
Yep. And then for the negative side, though, what are our cons?
Yeah, the further that you get into May gets to be a tough month. So again, it kind of depends a little bit on where you are regionally, but in the U.S. here, do they celebrate Mother's Day in other countries, AJ? I feel
any
like
country that Hallmark sells cards, Scott.
Let us know if you're one of our international listeners. We want to know: do you celebrate Mother's Day when we celebrate Mother's Day, which is sort of beginning to mid May, somewhere around there?
May-ish, within the month of May.
It's in the month of May, the merry month of May. But then we also have Memorial Day. I know that is an American holiday. And that's one in here in the US where people tend to travel. Mother's Day, you can still actually do a meeting on Mother's Day weekend. Because we recommend a Friday, Saturday meet. So don't, like in your brain, you'll think, oh, I can't do it. It's Mother's Day weekend. Yeah, you can. You're not meeting on Mother's Day, so you should be fine. Memorial Day weekend, on the other hand, is tough because lots of times people will travel on those weekends. So you've got to be aware of that.
Yeah, last year I was working with a church, and so we did have a meeting over Mother's Day because I ended up with lots of flight delays, slept in the Philadelphia airport, and got a flight home so that I could be at church with my wife by the time church started, and it happened within minutes on Sunday morning. So yes, you can meet on Mother's Day. Your consultant may not be excited about it, but
yeah, that's right. I'll also say this: the end of May can get tough. There's graduations, school graduations, and end of the year stuff. And I feel like May, as a parent of kids in elementary school, I feel like May is worse than December. Like there's field day and there's awards day and there's this and that, and just people, even though that doesn't necessarily interfere with a Friday, Saturday meeting, it can feel like it does. And people get very stressed out about that. So you've got to just navigate those things and be really strategic about when you're going to plan your May meeting. And then finally, the other con there for this season is that you're going to conclude right before summer. And sometimes, and we'll talk about this here in just a minute, but people turn their brains off for some reason in the summer. Churches do. And so it's easy to just go through this process, and then it's summertime and you forgot that you even went through a process. And then again, you're getting into the fall, and then you get busy in the fall, and then you're going, oh, wait a minute, didn't we do a strategic planning process? Where's the results of this? So it takes leadership then to really push through the summer and really begin the implementation in the summer. Summer can actually be a great time for implementation if you're diligent and leverage the summer. But if you turn your brain off, like churches sometimes do in the summer, then it's going to be hard for you to kind of kickstart that back when the fall rolls around. So
yeah, so depending on your staff team or leadership team, if you're able to lead them well and utilize maybe fewer programs during the summer, then that could be a pro. So Yep.
Honestly, AJ, if I had to rank this, I know we didn't talk about this before we went on here. If I had to rank like best and worst times, like 1 through 4, it's kind of just to give you a peek ahead. We're trying to tell you that there's not really a best and worst time. But if I had to pick a one that was maybe the worst, it'd probably be this one.
Summer.
Actually, not
the
summer.
After Easter, before summer.
After Easter, before summer, it gets tight. That end of the school year is tough, and then you might be bleeding into, depending if it's a late Easter, you might be bleeding into the beginning of summer.
Yeah.
So
it may be kind of our shortest season, actually.
It's a really narrow window.
Yeah.
And that would be the point. So maybe be the least optimal, but we've done it and it works. So it's definitely doable if you think through it and plan ahead.
Yeah. All right. So that brings us up to our third quarter, and we're calling it kind of the summer season quarter. So what are the benefits here?
I just want to say, I actually really like summer for a strategic planning process. And it would be the one that everyone assumes is the worst. Everyone says summer's the worst.
Yeah.
It's not the worst, actually. Here's why I like summer and the pros of doing a process in the summer. You do generally have fewer ministry obligations, or at least different ones. So you generally you might have camp, which takes up a whole week, or VBS, which takes up a whole week. But you generally don't have a lot of those weekly things. Maybe small groups are on pause over the summer or whatever, or you don't do Wednesday night service or Sunday night service. Like you generally have a fewer ministry obligations. So it gives you more bandwidth to focus on a strategic planning process. So in that sense, it's a really good thing. And then I also love, AJ, that you can pivot directly from the planning season over the summer, like a June, July, August, or and then pivot that straight into implementation and leverage your fall momentum.
Yeah, that is good.
And you don't have to worry about it going out of your brain, because you're using the summer to plan, and then you're going straight into implementation in the fall, and it's great. So I actually really like the summer. I wish more churches would take advantage of a summer process.
I think so. Maybe sometimes it's just a perceived thing. Even, I don't know, kind of put our summer blinders on, and it's sort of like a blackout date, like, oh, we can't do anything new there. It's crazy. That's summer. But I think if we maybe take a fresh look at summer, we could see the opportunity.
Yeah. And that's in my cons there. So
let's jump in there then on the downside of summer.
The downside of summer is that you do have to plan your meeting times in advance. I'm not suggesting that people aren't gone on vacation or that your church doesn't have VBS. Of course you do. But the reality is that some people are gone for some of the summer.
Yeah.
People treat it like everyone's gone the whole summer. And that's not true. Some people are gone some part of the summer. So if you, and it might mean, that might mean that, Jim can't be on the team because Jim would miss 2 of the meetings. But if you can get a good enough group of 10 to 15 people who can be there for at least 2 out of the 3 meetings, that'd be great. If 80% of your folks, or let's say, if 100% of your folks can be there at least 2 out of 3 meetings, and you have about 80% of your folks at all 3 meetings, that's a win. Because the reality is, we have that attrition all times of the year. I mean, again, you think that people will be absent because it's summertime. People are absent when it's October because they had a wedding they had to go to, or they had a work trip that they had to go to. So, again, just don't make assumptions that it'd be too hard. It's not too hard. But you do have to plan in advance, because people tend to plan their summer trips in advance. Like I would say, here we're sitting here in January, AJ, I'd say a lot of people already know when their summer trips are, because they budget for them and they plan them, and it's easy to plan them in advance because generally people plan their summer trips in advance. So the con is you've really got to be strategic about when you're going to meet. And then the other thing is and you hinted at it already, AJ, it's this mental perception that the summer is off season. I don't know why people don't treat that about their work. Like your lay leaders who have, secular jobs, they still show up, unless they're actually gone on vacation throughout the summer, they're still there. Like they're there.
Yeah.
And I don't know, for some reason, we treat summer in the church like we're on island time. It's like Jimmy Buffett is the senior pastor of your church. It's First Margaritaville Baptist Church. And, I don't know. I don't get that. I'm not sure why that's the case. But if you can get over that mental thing, like treating summer like it's the off season, which it's not, then the summer is actually a very good time to do a strategic planning process.
Yeah. Not everybody's wearing their softball uniform and leaving after the third song. So,
right. Yeah, that's right. Yeah, exactly.
All right. Fourth quarter, we're calling this fall. So sort of just a post-summertime, generally speaking, September-ish.
Yeah, September, October, November, or August, September, October. Just kind of depends on how it falls for you. Generally, we're thinking after summer, like after school starts and before Thanksgiving. So however that works out for you. But the pros, I love this time. Leaders tend to be energized and they're motivated in the fall. The meeting times usually are fairly easy to arrange. People aren't typically, crowding their schedule in September and October, and even in August, depending. So you can more easily leverage the planning then to coincide with budgeting. So if you've got if your budgets are due in October and you finalize your next year's budget in the end of October or November, then it's nice to be doing that strategic planning process. When you get to the strategy portion and what's session 3 for us, it's nice that then you could then leverage that into a budget process. Because that is a challenge that we see sometimes with churches, is they'll make these plans and say, here's all these things we want to do. And then there's the budget question. And they basically have to have a, what's the right word? It says, AJ, almost like a supplementary budget meeting and go, okay, how are we going to reallocate things or find this money in the interim until we get to our next budget meeting? So if you do it in the fall, in your fall budget, and you do your fiscal budget, your budget in the fall, it's just nice for those stars to align. It's just very convenient.
Yeah. For that reason, that this is sort of a little sidebar, alternate planning method, and that is around your fiscal planning. So if your fiscal year is out of sync with the calendar year, then you may just want to back up 3 or 4 months from where you're going to approve your budget and begin your process in that window, wherever that may fall, so that you can be able to put your money where your mouth is on the things that you decide to plan and move forward with as a church.
Yeah, that would just be a side hack. So whenever your budgeting process is, if you can do the strategic planning as it butts right up against to that budgeting process, it's easier for the church on the implementation side.
Yeah. All right. So cons of the fall period.
Yeah, it's similar to letting Easter and summer derail you. You can let the holidays derail you. So you get through your process, and then you get busy with Thanksgiving and Christmas, and then January rolls around and you've forgotten what it is that you were going to do. So all of these, AJ, really are leadership challenges. You as the leader, as the senior leader, you can't let it fall off your radar. And if you don't let that happen, you'll be okay. The other one is that fall can sometimes have an attendance bump. And so you can actually fool yourself into thinking that the church is fine. You go, yeah, I don't know if we really need to go through a process. People are coming back. We're getting some baptisms. Things are fine. Let's just not do it. So you can let that fall attendance bump that you get in August or September kind of mask the fact that if you were to map it out, your church has actually been declining for the last 5 years or plateaued for the last 3 years or whatever it might be.
Yeah. Yeah. All right, man. These are good. And then you've got down kind of a little bonus thing here as well. So November, December, those are kind of sketchy.
Yeah. So the bonus here is, you could start a process 1 year and end it another year, right? Like if you started in November or December, you'd be finishing it in January or February. It's totally possible, but we just don't recommend it. That if you're going to start a process, like your first session is going to be in November, or your first session is going to be in December. The way to do it is to do it at the beginning of the month. So,
Right.
Meet at the beginning of November or meet at the beginning of December. That way you don't bump into Thanksgiving or into Christmas. But it's just those aren't maybe not optimal times to start, because people really are emotionally distracted by the holidays. Even if they're not actually busy yet, they tend to be emotionally distracted. I'll say this though, I worked with a church last year, AJ, and I feel like I did a meeting in November, and then I did a meeting in December, and they did great. So it's, but that process was mainly led by staff. So they were able to, hopefully your staff is competent enough to be able to spin multiple plates.
Mm-hmm.
And they certainly are more than competent, and they're doing really well, actually. And they haven't let things fall off the grid, and they're into their implementation phase right now, and they're doing great. So it is possible to do November, December. It's a challenge.
Yeah. Well, I think this was kind of a good exercise I know for you and I to kind of talk through these things because we do get asked so often. Hopefully it was helpful for you guys. So I don't know, in the end, I guess people maybe are not hearing from us an exact best or worst time to do it. And maybe they're just like, thanks, Captain Obvious and Sidekick, for telling us what we already knew. I don't think so, because I think there are pros and cons, and your church. So Scott, do you have a final conclusion for us on this?
I do. So the question, going back to the very beginning, the question is, so when is the best time of year for a strategic planning process? I want to first say, the whole point of this episode is to tell you the pros and cons of every season, because every season has its pros and cons.
Yeah.
But here's the real answer to the question. And it's this: the best time of year to start a strategic planning process is when you have the enthusiasm and the support of your church's senior leadership to do it.
Amen.
That enthusiasm is largely the byproduct of emotion, not logic. So if you wait to start, those emotions are going to fade, and what will happen is those leaders, their brains are going to kick into overdrive, and they're going to start rationalizing and finding reasons why, we don't want to spend the money on this. We don't really need to do the work. Things are probably okay. And, and then you'll not do anything. I have seen that happen, AJ. I know probably you have too. Churches that get stuck in deliberation. Well, when should we start? When should we do this? And enough time passes, and then that emotion that drove enthusiasm to begin with faded, and then they ended up doing nothing when they needed to do it. Like they weren't wrong. That emotion was not lying to them. Do you know what I'm saying?
Yeah, absolutely.
So
yep, they begin overthinking it and just taking too long to make a decision, which, and this could be a whole separate podcast, but a lot of times it's that methodology of decision-making or lack of decision-making, which likely has led to the church being in the need of revitalization to begin with.
Yeah.
So the best way to break out of that is to break out of that. And whenever you feel like you've got the support together and you're ready to do it, strike while the iron's hot.
You just go, okay, let's do it.
To move forward. Yeah.
And then point them to this article. So when they say, well, are we sure? Is this time of year okay? Then, go to malfirstgroup.com/24, show them this article and say, yes, see, this time of year is good for this reason.
Yeah.
And here are the challenges we've got to be aware of. But look, there's pros and cons to every season. And, let this article be a benefit to you, a service to you, to show that there's good and bad to every season. So every time of year has its pros and cons. The key is to recognize what they are, leverage the benefits of that particular time of year, that season, and just navigate the challenges. They're all challenges that you can navigate. But most importantly, don't forget this. You need to start a process as soon as you have the leadership support to start it. Do not wait. Start now. So, on that note, AJ, I just want to remind people that registration for Church Revitalization University closes on Saturday at 11. That's February 1st. So depending on when you're listening, February 1st at 11:59 p.m. Central Time, and then it's going to be closed. Registration then will be closed until the fall. So you might be listening to this going, well, hold on a minute. I'm not sure if I've got the support together yet. That's fine. I'm not sure if I've got, if this is the right season, that's fine. You will have access to the course for a whole year. So you still got some flexibility on when to start. We will be dripping out the course so that we pace you out a little bit and you don't just kind of consume all the content and then not do anything with it. But it's okay. Like if you're not going to start till March, it's fine. You're not going to start till after Easter, that's fine. You'll have a whole year to go through the course, but you don't have all year to register. You've got till Saturday, February 1st at 11:59 p.m. Central. So please register this week. Don't wait.
Yeah. And, the vision of the Malfers Group is to make resources like Church Revitalization University available to churches regardless of your financial abilities or disabilities. And so we've priced the course at just $499 with options even to make a couple payments on that. Because we care a lot about your church having access to this type of content and the results that it can produce for you. So that also being the case, again, this is the last week. If you don't have time to pull it together, hopefully within the framework of fiduciary responsibility in your church, $499 is something that you have access to, and you'll be able to just pull the trigger on that and then work out what's the best time for us to do it. So I hope that'll work out for you because it's important for the future of your church and the impact that you can make in your community and around the world. We want to see that happen, and we want to hear those stories and celebrate with you throughout 2020.
Yeah, and listen, you kind of hinted at this, AJ, but you can actually get the monthly installment options, three monthly payments of $189. So you end up paying a little bit more than if you do the one-time thing, but if you're not sure if you can get your church to sign on, but you still want to register, go ahead and be able to get in right now. $189 gets you in, and there's a 30-day refund policy. So within 30 days, if you can't get your team to agree to make the other two payments, we'll refund the $189, but this at least gets you in the door. So our goal is to be able to get you in the door at a really low price so that you can do this process and maximize this process this year. So go to ChurchVitalizationUniversity.com, register today, and don't miss out on this opportunity because it won't open back up till ? We're not sure. Later this fall, probably.
Yeah.
But we can't guarantee when that next open window will be. So we want you to register right now.
Well, thanks for joining us this week on episode 24 of the Church Revitalization Podcast. Scott, thank you for a great topic, and we'll be looking forward to having you back again next week with some fresh content for you again. In the meantime, if you're interested in anything that we do at the Malfers Group, come visit us at malfersgroup.com. You can email us at leadership@malfersgroup.com. And we'll be glad to spend some time talking through what's going on with your church and help you make a great plan for the future. Thanks. God bless you.